Thanks for clicking. Real estate experts are happy with mortgage rates following the Bank of Canada's announcement, as it could unleash some pent-up demand. This according to CTV in the wake of the central bank's 25 basis point rate cut. And obviously the media has consulted the best and the brightest to make these pronouncements. The people that know their stuff have done the research to get an accurate assessment of the market.
Pent-up buyer demand.
Is pent-up investor demand.
So there is a lot of pent-up demand.
But despite lots of pent-up demand,
there is likely pent-up demand sitting on the sidelines.
I mean, you talk about pent-up demand and
perhaps there's a lot of pent-up demand.
On pent-up demand.
I do think that there's a lot of pent-up demand.
People don't want to wait too long.
No.
We've got a lot of pent-up demand and a lot of humans
ladder.
looking for housing.
Yeah.
There is no doubt that there is pent-up demand.
And I can see Russia from my house.
But what if we took an honest look, approached pent-up demand academically? What would that tell us?
I don't know what that is.
So what I want to do today is go over the arguments saying that this Bank of Canada rate cut could unleash pent-up demand in the real estate market, undertake a study to look at how much pent-up demand there could actually be, discuss some intervening variables, like basic economics, and then discuss some implications. The beginning of November is upon us, and with that, we're eagerly awaiting the release of October's real estate data from the local boards, and we'll obviously have an update out on that data on this channel. Make sure you click like and subscribe if you want to get those updates, but for now, let's get into this pent-up demand. Onto this elusive pent-up demand. Given the Bank of Canada's interest rate cut on Wednesday, CTV turned to the most unbiased source they could find. Evidently, Coldwell Banker CEO Karim Kennedy, who said we're seeing some pent-up demand and that can now be unleashed. And then, of course, social media did its thing within 24 hours of the announcement. But what about this pent-up demand that we've been hearing about since at least 3 months after the Bank of Canada first hiked interest rates back in 2022. And for this, let's go to the data. We're going to use Toronto as our test case city, as it has a large data set that we can pull from and represents a large portion of the population, with the understanding that Toronto is not at all representative of the country at large.
It's better you've apologised.
So let's gather up all of the data over the past 11 years and we'll run everything through Excel to find out how many sales we should be expecting out of Toronto in a given year. After doing this, we see on average for the past 11 years, Toronto should be seeing about 89,000 units sold. Now, the notion that there's a large portion of pent-up demand just sitting on the sidelines waiting to buy, at least for those that didn't make that argument in 2022, right after there was record sales numbers in Toronto, rests on the idea that since sales were so low over the past few years, all that pent-up demand should be coming back to the market. So with an 11-year average of 89,000 sales per year, 2020 to 2024, that's 5 years, add those all up, we should have seen 445,000 sales. But we didn't. If we add up all of that sales that we did see, including all of that demand that was pulled ahead to 2020 and 2021, and the low sales years of 22, 23, and 24, we get 410,000 sales, a deficit of 35,000, which means even if we take those 35,000 sales that we didn't see and add them to, say, 2024 sales levels, that only gets us up to 97,000 sales, still well below what we saw in 2021. Meaning any prediction that we're going back to 2021 levels due to pent-up demand just isn't borne out by the data.
Especially all that pent-up demand for housing.
We have pent-up demand there already.
But we know that there is a lot of pent-up demand.
They actually said there's a lot of pent-up demand.
Now, yes, Ontario has seen an awful lot of immigration, especially since 2021, but the median wage of newcomers, at least in 2022, was sitting at $52,000. Those $52K incomes are not buying a $900,000 home.
Yes, they will.
So then the argument would be that these newcomers put upward pressure on rental prices, which pushes renters into the home buying market, creating excess demand in the resale market, though that doesn't hold water, as well as rental prices are dropping. So I'm not sure how much I buy the argument that changes in the population not captured by the nominal sales data would lead to this, since 2022, pent-up demand argument. Now, admittedly, 100%, this is an incredibly crude study, but at least it was a genuine attempt to find out how much pent-up demand there is waiting in the wings after the last slower than usual years for sales. But it is a very crude investigation, and there's any number of intervening variables that's going to affect pent-up demand. A deepened investigation into immigration, government policy, etc., with the foremost being demand at what price/cost of borrowing. And since there does appear to be some mass confusion as to what exactly demand is, let's define it. And for that, we'll turn to MIT.
I don't know what that is.
MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, it's like a really prestigious post-secondary school.
Nope.
So let's consult MIT, which says that demand functions give the quantity of goods purchased by a given consumer as a function of prices and income or utility. So what that means is that price and income matter. When we undertook that study earlier, we weren't looking at prices or income. We weren't looking at costs. And if we look at costs, currently, it's much higher than it was during that period under study, with mortgage rates much, much lower over the preceding 11 years. Much, much lower than they are now. Prices as well were also much, much lower throughout that period than they are right now. Meaning, keeping everything the same, demand won't be the same as it was during those preceding 11 years. A fact that becomes even more clear when we look at the other side of the equation, income. And for this, we'll look at the RBC Home Ownership Index, which measures home ownership costs as a percentage of median income, giving us a better idea of where demand actually lies. And as we can see, it's not even close to where it was at the tail end of 2021 and miles away from where it was in 2020. So the total cost of a home, meaning the price and the interest rate, is still much, much higher than it had been pre-COVID. And incomes just haven't caught up, which is why all of these pent-up demand arguments that we've seen over the past 3 years have all turned out to be utter nonsense.
I have done nothing wrong. Ever.
The real estate industry as a whole, brokers, banks, commentators, the media that it pays, tends to treat demand as though it occurs in a vacuum, when, as we've seen today, it's much, much more complicated than that. Like there's some mythical demand like we saw in 2021 just lying in wait.
I know this, and I love you.
But as recent sales numbers have shown, and as we've seen since 2022, demand is much more complicated than just picking up your market learning on the street. And remember, even those measures of demand that we went over today, prices, income, interest rates, historical averages, all fall within the greater domestic and geopolitical environment. Those years of elevated demand pre-COVID were all based on an unemployment rate that's either at or much lower than it is right now, while exports to the United States were either A, staying the same, or B, increasing, something that is not and probably will not be the case in 2026. So, in summary, just using the admittedly crude data that we were able to access today, that does not lead to the amount of pent-up demand as is being insisted upon by the real estate industry for the past 3 years. A problem only compounded by higher prices, higher interest rates, in a very, very different domestic and geopolitical environment than which we have been accustomed. As such, as we've seen 3 years of the media, of the industry getting the pent-up demand story wrong, after 3 years, we're still hearing the same pent-up demand story, which may or may not be in the offing.
Better earning than learning.
And I didn't even do Sean Cathcart. We'll save that for the CREA release. So, while maybe interest rates are going to dramatically change, who knows, maybe the president gets his new Fed chair, they engage in yield curve control, and we all get lower fixed mortgage rates for who knows. But maybe not. But the point is, while we are continuing to still hear about this elusive pent-up demand from the media, from the industry, starting 3 years ago, continuing to this day, in any of those quotes, in any of those videos that I showed, not a single study was quoted. We at least tried to make an attempt at it on this channel, showing that there is a lot of major headwinds to this massive, not so massive, pent-up demand that's just waiting on the sidelines, waiting to jump into the market. I've made the contention that all of this pent-up demand was a way to induce FOMO. We'll see if it works this time around. With that said, we will obviously continue to track the media's narrative, the real estate industry's nonsense on this channel. Make sure you click, like, and subscribe if you want to get those updates. But for now, thanks so much for watching.